December 31st, that deal is in play. Mike Gill with you. Brian Windhorst, ESPN.com, covers the NBA. Jerry Colangelo has been hired by the 76ers. But who initiated this? Was it Josh Harris just bored one day saying we need a better stability and more direction? Or did somebody else step in? Let's bring Brian into the conversation at ESPN.com. He says that lobbying to the NBA from other owners may have played a part in how this all came about. Brian, welcome aboard, man.
I don't think Josh Harris, I've seen his resume, I don't think he's got time to be bored. He's a pretty busy guy.
You covered the NBA a while, and you've been around a lot of very good teams. How is it that the Philadelphia 76ers, a team with one win and, 40 wins over the last 2 years, have maybe been the most talked about team in the league this week?
Well, I think what's so interesting about this NBA season is there's an incredible amount of parity. If you look at the Eastern Conference, the difference between Team 1 and 3 games, the West is not as deep as it was, so more teams are involved. But despite this parity, all anybody is focusing on is this team off to a historic start, the Warriors, and the team off to a historically bad start in the 76ers. It's really a remarkable thing. This is sort of a really good-looking year for the NBA. More teams are into this. More fan bases are thinking that they could be in the playoffs than have been in years by mid-December, but that's not what anybody's focusing on. And, there's this Sixers story, for those of us who cover the league, is fascinating because the experiment that Sam Hinkie is undertaking is something that those of us who write about this and analyze this, we literally talk about this for hours amongst ourselves. But the fans of the team are watching losing. And it's that dichotomy that is the reason why Jerry Colangelo is here, because no matter what your plan is, no matter how much it may work in a laboratory, it's really, really hard to lose. It's hard to walk out of that arena night after night, year after year, losing. And that is one of the tenets of the NBA, that it's one thing to detail a rebuilding plan. It's another thing to live through it. Basically laboratory versus reality, and that's something that's played out with the Sixers especially.
Brian, believe me, here in the Delaware Valley, it is this polarizing discussion. I've been on the air for 10 years. A team that's 1-21 dominates conversation and what side you're on. You mentioned the losing and the struggles. But does this Colangelo move have anything to do with the losing on the floor?
Yes and no. I mean, at the end of the day, somebody's going to be the worst team in the league, and whether that team is 1-21 or 4-18, there's somebody that's going to be the worst team in the league. But this is, I think where this got complicated is that the other owners were feeling the pinch that the Sixers business-wise were causing them. The Philadelphia is a top 5 or 6 size market. They are a team that's expected to draw big crowds, create large revenues, get large local TV base, put money into the revenue-sharing system, and they weren't holding up their end of the bargain, and that was causing some issues with owners. Now, listen, owners complain about stuff all the time. There probably isn't a day that goes by where Adam Silver doesn't take a call or get an email from some owner who's upset about something. But when you could tell that the owners were upset about the way the Sixers were doing this was when they tried to legislate it out last summer. When I say last summer, I mean 2014. They tried to install lottery reform to try to thwart what the Sixers were trying to do. And they had a majority, but I think you need 23 votes. So you need almost like a super majority to make such a change, and they didn't have the votes. So they tried to legislate this whole thing out, and that's all you needed to see right there. And they weren't going to stop. And I think if at the end of the day, Josh Harris owns the team. Josh Harris decides who he hires and fires. It was Josh Harris's decision to hire Jerry Colangelo. But when Josh Harris got to the point where he was ready to do something, you heard Jerry Colangelo say how fast it came together. Well, it came together so fast because Adam Silver was sitting on this plan. He may have even been lobbying Josh Harris with this idea for a while. And then when Josh Harris got to the point where he was ready to pull the trigger, it came together fast because of how long and how many issues Adam Silver's been having to deal with his constituency on this.
Very interesting stuff. And obviously the thought around NBA circles, Brian Windhorst is with us, ESPN.com, is that you have to be bad to be good. The rules are set up. So some would suggest this isn't a Sixers problem. This is an NBA problem, and they're taking the easy way out by calling the Sixers out, quote-unquote, helping them clean up their mess. But isn't this an NBA problem? Isn't this something that they created? And the Sixers were just being the only team that was beating them at their own game, the only team that could really stomach the losing.
Right. Well, Sam Hinkie may end up being a man ahead of his time. He may be doing the exactly correct thing in a laboratory. Okay, I do think he is absolutely playing the percentages. But this is something that comes down to where the cookie crumbles all the time in the modern NBA. The concept of what is absolutely the correct thing to do on the paper and what is the correct thing to do in reality. And like I said, in reality, even though it makes more sense to keep a guy like Christian Wood on your roster because he has a chance, even if it's a low chance, he has a chance to theoretically become a player for you. It makes more sense on an NBA team to have a guy like Gerald Wallace. Because even though Gerald Wallace isn't going to be a part of the future of your team, sometimes you need to have guys like that to be leaders. And just like it absolutely makes total sense for Sam Hinkie to play the percentages, to build through the lottery, and to do everything he possibly can to give his team the greatest chance of getting a high lottery pick, you still have to go through year after year of losing. And your young players who are very impressionable have to go out in the world and be known as losers. You have to leave your arena every night as a loser. Your owner has to wake up every day, a guy who's been nothing but a winner in his whole life, and that's how he became a billionaire. He's got to decide he's got to deal with being a loser day in and day out. That's where you run into the problem. The reality of living life as a team that's doing this. It's not the actual plan itself. Like I said, I think Sam Hinkie's plan is exactly correct. I think that, again, in a laboratory, he can lay it out for you and sell you on it, and I'm sure that's exactly what he did with Josh Harris and the rest of the owners. But going through it, especially if you've never done it before. Now, if you've owned a team for 25 years and you've torn it down 3 times and rebuilt it and you know what it is, but Josh Harris had never done that before. And so really at the end of the day, what this looks to me like is that Josh Harris ran out of patience. And we'll see how things go forward, but the indication to me is that Josh Harris ran out of patience. And one of the most important things you do as general manager, it's as important as drafting, it's as important as trade and contract negotiations, it's as important as hiring a coach. You have got to have a finger on the pulse of the billionaire. There's a saying in the NBA amongst general managers, and that is that the billionaire is never wrong. It's never going to be the billionaire's fault, okay? That's the way the league operates. And that's just the truth. And a great general manager has learned that lesson. And that's one of the reasons why these jobs are so hard. And at the end of the day, what it looks like to me, and I'm not sitting next to Josh Harris, okay? He's not briefing me on all these decisions. But it looks like to me that Josh Harris got tired of it.
Brian Windhorst, just a couple more with him. Do you think now this signals the end of the road of Sam Hinkie, or are they legitimate? Is he going to hang around? I think it's very interesting that Hinkie's going to have all this stuff sitting in their lap, and it's going to end up being Jerry the genius in the end. I mean, that's the way this is going to be. That's the road this is going to go down, right? Jerry Colangelo came in and saved this, when in reality he's going to be handed a bill of goods that is almost unprecedented in the NBA.
Well, nothing in the NBA is new. Nothing in the NBA is new. Everything has happened before. This has happened to many, many different executives, where they're like the starting pitcher that labors through 7 innings, and then the guy comes in and throws 7 fastballs and gets the save or the win, right? But I don't know what's going to happen. They say Sam's going to stay. I'll just wait and see on that. What I do know is this. The word chairman indicates that that's the guy with the final decision. By the way, if you're the president, you think you're doing pretty well, right? You say, I'm president. You can't hire anybody above me. Oh, chairman. There's chairman's above president, right? So to me, Jerry Colangelo is going to have the say. And also, Jerry Colangelo is 76 years old. I don't think he's coming in here with a 5-year plan. Now, they're in way too deep right now to change course. I said this on SportsCenter. You could somehow bring Red Auerbach back from the dead and put him in that chair, and Red Auerbach's not going to be able to do something that's going to change something short term. They're so far into this that they have no other method of improving right now. But you are not going to see trades for JaVale McGee and the dead contract of Gerald Wallace. When they make player acquisitions in the short term, the way Jerry Colangelo operates is it's not going to be for players like that. Their next series of moves are going to be to get players who can play, not to get second-round picks or to gamble on guys who have gamble on 4 guys, one of whom may end up being your 9th man. And again, I don't think Sam Hinkie in the laboratory is incorrect in doing that. I really can totally and fully on board with his process. But Jerry Colangelo is a bit more of a realist. Jerry Colangelo has built many teams, and his track record is not to do the same thing Sam is doing. So I would think that whether Sam is in the chair or not, his process is going to be changing drastically.
I want to ask you one last question, Brian, because I think this is kind of interesting with in regards to all this. You mentioned now Colangelo has said that the league has changed. Free agency, there's not a lot of player movement. You keep your own guys now. The rules are in place for that. He said you don't bring in a guy that might help you win 10 extra games. But as you said, he might not have a 5-year plan here. But here's my question for you. Do other teams, GMs, envy the Sixers? Do they wish that their ownership group would let them do what Josh Harris has allowed Sam Hinkie to do? Are they jealous of what Sam Hinkie has been allowed to do for 3 years in building this team?
No. Over the last 18 months, when you would talk about the Sixers, what people would say is, when is the owner going to yank the chain? Because unless Josh Harris was a completely different individual than all these other billionaires, they're going to get tired of this, regardless of what they signed up for. I'm telling you, this has happened over and over and over in NBA history. One of the most important things you have to evaluate as the top, well, I don't care if you're running the Eagles or if you're running the Phillies or you're running the Sixers. You have to continue to have a pulse for the patience of your owner, because at the end of the day, the billionaire is not going to be wrong. So that's what people were saying, is especially after this last year when the Sixers made really no moves in this last year to dramatically improve their team. All of their moves over the summer were, basically putting off things. People were saying, when is Josh Harris going to yank the chain? We got the answer. But I will say this: if any one of these guys that Sam had drafted had actually been showing the promise of a guy like Kristaps Porzingis, and by the way, Jahlil Okafor's stats are better than Porzingis' stats, even though I'm pretty confident that Porzingis is a better prospect. But if any one of his picks that he had taken actually looked like he was going to be a bona fide franchise player, I mean, maybe a little bit with Okafor, but his off-court problems have destroyed that, then I don't think we'd be having this conversation today. And ultimately, it would have really helped if any of his player acquisitions looked like they were going to be a superstar.
And you wonder how much the Embiid thing has hurt all of this, because obviously that is the great unknown. They get him back and he plays. Who knows what happens to this team moving forward? Brian Windhorst, ESPN.com, with more on the unbelievable story of the 76ers. Thanks, Brian.
Take care, guys.